I got to admit, as many of these as I've done, I'm normally not nervous about talking about stuff at all. I'm genuinely nervous, and I'm being serious because you guys do such a great job.
Well,
And
thanks.
the stuff that you've produced is so good that it makes it hard. I'm worried that I'm gonna let us down.
Oh no.
So I am. I've not felt this nervous about a discussion in a while.
Well, all the things that you're passionate about and you're good about or good at is what we want to know, right? So it's not like, this is very different from a film production or something. We just want to know what's in your head.
Well, and that's always been why it's been so comfortable to have these kinds of conversations, because I just talk what I know.
Yep.
And it's simply that. But I can't tell you how impressed I am. I can't verbalize adequately how impressed I am by finally seeing hunting footage. Or finally, it wasn't even the hunting. It was the coalition. There was another video that I saw that was another match, and it was just a depiction of a match. It's just a typical match. But you guys, there's so many videos, and I call it. They just say what they see.
Yeah.
Oh, we're glassing this ridge line, and we're waiting for a buck, and there's one at 400 yards. Yeah. They just say what they see, and it's just that one after another. And then I was watching what you guys were doing. It's like, wait, the truck's broken. What? It's like, oh my God, this is a story.
Yeah.
And it was just so cool. So I'll do my best.
Oh, you're gonna do great.
I'll do my best.
Yeah, we're just talking.
For sure. Yeah. And that's a lot of that, Zach he's been doing it a long time, but it's amazing to me how much work is done on the front end. I'm learning it. Mm-hmm. He's great at it. 'Cause a hunt, you don't know how it's going to go. Right. It might happen on day one or the last day, whatever, but there's a lot of planning that he does on the front end. Like, how do we want this to feel? How do we want it to sound? And that's what he's great at. And it's cool to see it come to, like the Mexico Coues deer hunt. It was cool to see it come to fruition.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's always been easier. I have an advantage because I'm a hunter and I know the guys who are hunters, and I can orchestrate and pull the strings and set it up in a way that if we took a guy off the street who's just good at producing and saying, hey, you're a filmer, hey, you're an editor, here's the models or the talent or whatever, and putting them all together, that works sometimes. But for what we're doing, like, I'm the guy that goes and I'm going on a backpack hunt as soon as this is done, Mm-hmm. So when we're trying to tell those stories, it's like, it's kind of second nature for us. So it's an advantage. Just like I think Jared said the other day, it's like Jimmy Chin's an amazing cinematographer for climbing because he was an insane climber and he was buddies with all the guys. And so the storytelling, he learned the camera, but it was already in his head.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
for sure. That's awesome. Well, we're up in Belt, Montana at the Defiance Antisocial. This is, I think it's year 5 or 6, something like that. But
Fifth annual.
Yep. Yeah. So great match. And we have Eric Stecker with us, and your exact title, what's your title?
So I'm the COO of the Extreme Group, which
Cool.
is a group that owns both Defiance and McMillan.
Awesome.
Now, my history is in manufacturing, so I stay entirely on the manufacturing side. Extreme Group is also involved in other things, but a lot of that is done by other folks because it's not manufacturing. It's rifle building, training. There's a whole suite of things that they offer in different areas, and so I don't get involved in any of that. I'm purely in the manufacturing side of it, so McMillan and Defiance.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you have a long history at Burger Bullets, and
Yes.
I want to jump into your past and get to know you a little bit more. But
Yeah.
I thought that a good way to start the podcast is you have so much history with building bullets.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Me, I've been shooting guns and bullets forever. Mm-hmm. So have you. I have no idea what's a bullet start like, and how does it get to where I thought that would be a fun way to start the podcast.
Well, there's a couple different approaches, but I'll talk about how Burger does it. Because like Nosler has their ballistics, they have their extruded bullets, and there are other folks that have turn bullets like Barnes. But the way Burger does it is they take a strip, so just gilding metal. So just a strip of copper, and you punch out a disc, and that turns into a cup, and then you progressively draw it out to what becomes a jacket, which is just basically a tall cup. And then you have another machine. In Burger's case, you have another machine that takes a chunk of lead, and then those two things are processed separately and independently, and then they're put together in a machine that is seating the bullet. So in Berger's case, they do it in 2 steps. And I'm not telling anybody anything out of school. This is something you could go get a tour and see all this.
Yeah.
So they do it in 2 steps. And the first step is to put the base of the bullet together, in the sense you have a punch come down through the top of the cup and it pushes against the lead. There are very important things related to trapping air and all that kind of stuff that you have to be careful of. And then that forms the base. And then it moves on to the next press, where it takes and runs the bullet in the other direction. And if it's a boat tail, there's a boat tail punch or flat base. And then it runs it up into the ogive die, which makes the nose of it. And then the pin ejects it, and now you've got a bullet. Berger is unique because Berger focuses on, and I'll remind everybody that I don't work for Berger anymore. This is not an endorsement of Berger. I'm simply saying what I know to be true because I was there for 30 years. Berger focuses entirely on balance around the axis. And so the thing that's critically important with Berger is you have to make sure that jacket is pristinely clean when the core that's also pristinely clean is put into the cup. And then when you seat it, you don't want any air, you don't want any oil or any lubricants between those 2 things. You're seating into a jacket that has that 3/10,000ths or less variation in wall thickness.
Wow.
That's huge, because now you've got a solid copper core that's of 1 density, and you've got, a solid lead core that's of 1 density, and then you've got a copper jacket that's of another density. So if that copper jacket has variation in its thickness, that lead moves into the highs and the lows, and now you've got an imbalanced tire.
Wow.
So that's what creates
Because everything's
dispersion.
hardened when they're mated together.
Well, it's not so much that they're hardened, it's the fact that lead is so much heavier.
Yeah.
So hypothetically, if you had a lead-only bullet that was hard enough that it didn't foul and all those other problems, if you had a lead-only bullet that was going down a pristine barrel, then it would be perfectly balanced as it exited the muzzle. And so as it's spinning at 250,000 RPM, you get minimal amount of dispersion. But when you take that lead, very dense, very heavy material, and you encircle it in another lighter material, well, now what you've done is you've created distortion within the cylinder of the heavier material. And so if that copper jacket is extremely thin in one position and extremely thick in another position, and it's round, then the portion of the lead that's in the thin position is further away from the axis. So as it's spinning under force, it's making a corkscrew.
Wow.
And so from day one, this is not Eric Stecker's doing. This is Walt Berger's doing. From day one, that balance around the axis was the premium objective at all times. And so then as the bullet's spinning, you minimize the dispersion. And the thing that's interesting about Berger is they use a 3/10,000ths or less tolerance in variation and uniformity on all sizes. So that's true of a 17 caliber jacket, which is, 17 thousandths thick. It's also true of a 30 caliber jacket, which is 32 thousandths thick.
Wow.
But that still can only be 3/10,000ths.
Wow.
So it's even more balanced than, even though, you could go through, Brian's great at calculating all the geometries and all the impacts that the differences in densities have and dispersion and all that kind of thing. But the bigger caliber bullets are better at minimizing dispersion than the smaller ones, because it has the same tolerance across the board, but the proportionality is different in the bigger bullets.
Wouldn't it be mathematically more precise on a bigger bullet? Technically speaking,
technically, because it's the percentage of difference between the imbalance, between the 2 imbalance factors is going to be a smaller proportion of the weight than it is in the smaller bullet. And now this is where Brian gets really, because now you have the offset of, you have a bigger diameter versus a smaller diameter, and that's got its own effect. But the fact that it was interesting that when the 3/10,000ths dimension was determined, and it wasn't actually determined by Walt, he was the one that promoted it. But interestingly enough, Berger bullets were originally made by J4 Jackets that were made by a company called Spivco. Well, Spivco was a company that got started by one of the original founders of Sierra. So when Sierra was originally founded, they have these guys. Well, they ended up selling to the Leisure Group, and then that guy couldn't compete by making bullets. But there were some frustrations, and I won't get into all that. But when he was in another industry and making these cups, he decided, well, you know what? If you made a 3/10ths cup and made it into bullets, then they'd be the best bullets on the planet, because none of the cups were that concentric, that uniform. And so that's what he did. Well, it just so happened that, the planets aligned and Walt Berger happened to be the guy around who was interested in balance in bullets. And so that all sort of grew through Walt, but it actually started with a Sierra guy.
Oh, wow.
Interestingly enough.
Yeah.
And so Sierra's, the innovation from the Sierra guy created this 310,000s. That became the standard, and it was never questioned. There was never a meeting where anybody sat down, because I can tell you from experience, getting 310s out of a jacket, out of a bullet jacket, sometimes it takes 2 days, sometimes it takes 2 months.
Wow.
And if you require that within the product, then if you're at 5/10ths, it's like, we're close enough, right? Let's just go ahead and make them. It's been 2 weeks. Let's just go ahead and make them. There was never a discussion about accepting that as being okay. And part of the reason was, we knew we already had done it. And that's one of the most frustrating things I've ever experienced. If you've done something and now you're telling me I can't do it, I'm not gonna handle that very well. So the idea of, we've done this before, so let's get it right this time. But that's not an easy thing to do. And that's one of the reasons why it's not common in the other brands. Now, I say that based on the measuring of jackets. Measuring a formed bullet is a very difficult thing to do because it's a destructive test. And you really, once you start bending it and moving it, then you change dimensions that small are impossible to measure with affected material. But in measuring the jackets that I've measured over the years, the ones you could get, it was common for the other brands to not worry about hitting 310s. Now, sometimes they did, and those bullets shoot great. But when they don't, you can't make. That's one of the things I've always recommended to people, and it's funny how so few people tend to do this. If you get a really good lot of bullets, the thing that you should do is set it aside, because now you've got a standard. Now you've got a baseline. Because a good bullet can't overwhelm a bad setup, but a good bullet can tell you if your setup's bad. And what commonly happens is a good lot of bullets. It's like, well, that's what I'm going to shoot in the championship. That's what I'm going to shoot in the big matches. That's what I'm going to shoot when I go up against Nick or whatever. Whatever you might say. But the fact is, if you've got a good lot of bullets that you can set aside, and that if I've got my setup right, these bullets always shoot, then it's a real quick check. You can eliminate one variable pretty quickly if you hold on to a good lot of bullets. And the reason why I say that is because typically a good shooting lot of bullets is the result of a particularly good lot of jackets. And so if you've got that, there's a reason. There's a balance reason. It's not a owl feathers and, planets aligning and all this other stuff. There's a mechanical balance reason. And if you've got that, then, it's like, okay, I've got my check. So now I can check all my gear to make sure it's not the bullet, with that set of bullets. But
that's awesome.
No, that's good insight for sure. So every time you run a new lot, it's a unique process to set up whatever it is to create the jacket and test it before anything essentially happens on that lot. At least for what Berger was doing.
Right. Well, all the lots were designated by two primary things. One was the material lot.
Okay.
And so all of the copper was certified, and I personally am a big believer. I'm sure they are still doing this, but I'm a big believer in single source materials. When it comes to precision products, you have to have a very strong relationship with your supplier. They have to understand why something on the line that an operator might be like, oh, that's not that big a deal. There are some things that are incredibly big deals.
Yeah.
And they affect things like grain structure, grain size. Those have very specific and direct effects on the resulting product that you make. And so if you have that under control, then you use their lot controls on their end as your lot controls on your end when it comes to material. And then on your side of the equation, you use your tooling. And so if you've got the same lot of material and you have the same tooling, then that's a lot. If through making that lot, a tool breaks and you have to put in another tool, even if everything is the same, that's a new lot.
Oh, wow.
Because like say, there is a process within Berger where the jacket goes through one set of dies, but it goes through a set. It goes through a progressive set. And if your second punch usually is what breaks, and you put another punch in, well, the final draw punch is still the same. So dimensionally, everything's still precisely the same. Except we just know from experience that when you change anything along the progression line, you change hardness, you change granule structure. You change things that are not necessarily perceivable if you don't look very hard. But later, after having made millions and millions of these things, what ends up happening is that slight difference turns into overall length variation. So you get the previous punch gives you an overall length variation of X, and then this new punch, even though the difference is slight, and it gets ironed out, but because of the hardness, maybe it grows a bit more, and you get a 15, 20 thousandths longer bullet, on average. And so you've got basically two sets. Well, precise balance around the axis is also significant, related to overall length and things related to drag and things related to all the other factors that affect the bullet while it travels down the range. And so every time something happens that would affect something like that, then you have to make another lot. And so that's what controlled a lot of the jackets. Now, once the jackets are produced and you've got lot A and they go into bullets, then the material is already established. Everything related to the jacket aspect is already established. So then it comes down to the tooling. And so when they make the bullets in the bullet forming process, one thing that's essential is each step is completely separate. And so I brought up earlier how those jackets run through a stage of 7 punches and dies. Well, all of those punches are being driven by a single ram. There's one ram going down at the same time. It's not necessarily the absolute best way to do it, but it's a way that works better than anything out there right now. And so that's the way it's being done. Well, on the bullet side, those are separated. So you don't have a single source of power doing both the seating and the pointing. Many other operations, they'll have a single ram that's coming down, and it can actually make jackets. Another machine will make cores. It'll pop them together. It'll make the seated bullet. It'll flip it over. It'll point it. And all of those things are happening under one ram.
Gotcha.
Well, all that stuff transfers. And we're talking steel, big, heavy steel things making copper and lead things. So a lot of people think, I can't make that big of a difference. It absolutely does. It absolutely does. It absolutely does. So Berger separates those two things.
Gotcha.
So there's a separate and completely disconnected seating press that seats the bullet. And then the bullet moves over to a press that's actually flipped over. So we don't even affect the jacket of the bullet because you don't want to take the lube off.
Oh yeah.
Because if you turn it, then now you're grabbing it. You don't want to do that. You want to affect it as minimally as possible. And so you let that bullet come around, and then you point it on a completely separate independent press. And the objective of that is you just want that consistency to be you want as much consistency as possible, and because you're flowing material. Bullets aren't stamped. They're extruded effectively. So when you're pointing an ogive, it grows because the material, as it gathers like a curtain and is drawing more towards the center, material doesn't compress. It flows. It flows. Yeah. So it travels. And so while that's traveling, the more that you have that's the same, the more that the travel is consistent between all the various different bullets. Nice. And so that's why all of those things are just incredibly important that happens. So,
well, I'm not going to keep forcing you to talk about Berger. It was an interesting topic that we were both thinking about. I'd like to get to the you guys Extreme Group and you taking over Defiance and that, but I'd like to go back a little bit. I'm just curious on your history, where you grew up, and when you got married and how you ended up at Berger a little bit.
Well, I was born in Phoenix, Arizona, and felt from the beginning that it was the armpit of hell.
I was born in Phoenix too, but I only lived there. My parents lived there for a year, and then I was out. So,
well, about 3 years old, my parents divorced, and and that created its own situation. But the fact is, I had an opportunity occasionally to go camping up in Flagstaff, which is north of us. And the first time as a kid, you don't necessarily understand these things. But as I started to understand things, I remember clearly going camping one time and thinking to myself, why does anybody live in Phoenix? There's trees, there's grass, there's green, there's life, there's all this stuff. Why does anybody live there? And so I grew an appreciation for Phoenix. So I'm going to jump forward quite a bit. Went on a ride to Sturgis, 10 days, 3,400 miles.
Nice.
And if anybody's been on a ride to Sturgis, especially from the West Coast, you get wet.
Yeah.
Well, this particular Sturgis was particularly wet. So wet that the attendance was actually down. It was that rainy through the period of time that we were there. We were there about 4 days. And we just got rained on the whole time. Prior to that, I've got a Harley. I love riding it. Prior to that, I didn't really care for riding a lot in Phoenix. So the rides that I would take would be to get out of town, to get up in the Phoenix, Prescott, Payson. And those were the fun rides. But after being rained on for 10 days, there's no place I like riding more than Phoenix. I tell you what, I love it. I love riding in Phoenix. Very little rain. So that part, I grew to love Phoenix for different reasons. But I grew up in Phoenix. I was an angry kid. I was a troubled kid. I got thrown out of private Catholic school in 7th grade. I failed the 8th grade in a public school.
Wow.
I failed again, and they actually kicked me out halfway through the year and signed a paper saying I was smart enough to go to high school. So I didn't have an intelligence problem. I had an attitude problem. And so I was angry at the world and just not making good choices. And I met Stacy, my wife, my current wife, girlfriend then, who happened to be Walt Berger's granddaughter. And so I'm not sure if this happens to everybody, but it happened to me. It sort of straightened me out.
Yeah,
nice.
And I think if I look back and I'm being honest, I was really looking for something to care about. And I really didn't. I really was angry, and I had a lot of stuff that I was venting at, that it was all screwed up. I was just a kid and all that kind of stuff. But when I met Stacy, I had something to care about. I always wanted to have a family. I always wanted to be a father. I was very excited about doing that. And Stacy, I saw something in Stacy pretty early on that, I definitely was attracted to her, definitely had strong feelings for her. But she's the kind of person that, I saw a kind of family thing. And this was in high school.
Yeah.
But it had an effect on me. It was as if a switch had been flipped. And I suddenly decided that I needed to care about things that were outside of me, that were bigger than me, that were more important than me. And so that led me down the path to hanging out with her a lot. And so that became sort of what I did. Well, she and, a few others would work for Walt. He ran the bench rest range. He was president of the Bench Rest Association for many years. And he ran the local bench rest range, and they needed help. He'd run nationals and local matches and all that kind of stuff. So I started out as a target puller.
Nice.
Kid out of high school. And I don't know why certain things happen to certain people, but for whatever the reason, I wasn't there very long, and he wanted me to start being range master. And so I started doing that. Well, I thought it was cool. And my dad was around. We were sort of strangers. He didn't really have, he wasn't really a hunter or anything like that. So although I was sort of attracted to shooting and all that kind of stuff for reasons that any kid would be, I never really got any exposure to shooting that made me excited about it. But when I'd go to these bench rest matches, I really got into it, and I was really excited, and I just was learning about the stuff. And at the time, so we got to the point in life when, I moved out pretty early. Stacy moved out pretty early. This is the 70s and 80s. Yeah. This was the, hey, do you know where your kids are?
Oh yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So most of my childhood was just wandering. We were feral. So by the time when Stacy graduated high school, she moved out immediately, and she was 17. Her grandfather signed for her to have a lease. I moved in with her. I was 17, and we were done with the whole people being in control of us thing.
Yeah.
And we were, wanting to figure out how to grow our life. Well, I was a cashier at the time, and I hated it. It was too, I don't know. I'm sort of a passionate guy. I'm sort of, intense isn't the word. I'm sort of a calm guy in that way, but I feel things very deeply. I just don't radiate it necessarily, I guess. And that wasn't for me. It was a job, and I needed a job. I needed to pay money. Well, Walt asked me one time if I wanted to help him unload his truck because he got a shipment of J4 jackets, and he'd go take his old beat up Dodge down to the UPS center, and they had to put it in there in the back of his Dodge, and he'd drive it home. And he didn't have a forklift because his shop was a shed in his backyard.
Wow.
And his storage was one of those, the thing you put your lawnmower in.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where the J4 jackets were
No
stacked
way.
up. And he wanted some help. He was an older guy. and he wanted some help unloading these boxes of jackets into the shed. And I'm like, sure, I'll come and help you. And that started as just, let me help you for half an hour. And he's like, well, let me show you what this all is. And let me show you this and let me show you that. And his daughter, her brother, their mom, and another lady were the only people that made bullets there besides Walt and Eunice, Walt's wife. And they only did it part-time. And so he like didn't necessarily have a need for more people, but I was so like into what he was doing. He's like, well, do you want to try it? You know? And I'm like, well, yeah, I'd love to try it. And I started making bullets. It was funny. So he paid a penny a bullet, right?
Nice.
And so I'm sitting there making bullets. And I started doing some funny math in my head. And he went inside, actually, and he left me there. He's like, all right, well, here's what you need. You just go ahead and make your bullets, and I'll come back in an hour and see how you're doing. So I walked in there, and I said, well, I'm going to quit my job, and I'm going to come work for you. And he said, no, I don't need anybody to come work for me. And I said, it doesn't matter. I don't like what I do, and I love that. I loved it. It was something about it. And it wasn't just the motion. There was something about it. But anyway, I got really excited about it. He wasn't excited about me quitting my job. And so he said, okay, well, I'm going to pay you, but you may not have work all the time. And I'm like, no problem. Whatever I can do, I'll do it. I'll just come down and do it. No big deal. So I show up, I start working. Well, the problem was I liked making bullets, but I wanted to learn everything. I wanted to see it all. And so as I'm making bullets, I'm like, well, what's that? And he'd show me, or he'd say, oh, I need a little help with this. So I kept getting up, and I kept doing something else. And he had a little lead machine where he'd cut his lead cores, and so I'd work on that. And so Stacy was getting pissed. She's like, well, you're there all day, and you're making like $20 because I would only work for maybe a couple hours making actual bullets. And I'd spend the rest of the day learning how to make cores, greasing jackets, setting dies, and just everything that I could do there because I was just so excited about it. And that went on for about 3 months. And she really turned the pressure up pretty big. And so he decided that he would go ahead and pay me $250 a month to manage the shop. Wow. So I became, at that point, he made me the plant manager. Nice. And he called it that, a plant manager. Like, all right, now it's a shed. It's not as big as this room. I mean, it was small.
Wow.
And, but I loved it. And so, I mean, really everything sort of went from there. I just threw myself into it, and fortunately paid a little bit more down the road. Yeah. Nice. And, that turned into bigger and better things. And so it was really cool. But, my childhood was one where I was lost and knew or believed strongly that there was more for me. But I decided that some things were important that really weren't. Mm. And so I focused a lot of negative energy in a direction that I shouldn't have. But then by the time I actually saw like, oh, okay, I can see something that's really for me, it just turned my life around. And so from at that point forward, I started shooting bench rest. I have a very weird entry into shooting. At 19 years old, I was shooting bench rest competitions, and that was my start. Wow. I didn't hunt until Berger started making hunting bullets, 12 years later, 13 years later?
Wow.
Dang.
So my entire shooting exposure, and we did it a lot. We traveled to matches. We shot every month. Walt held a match every month for 7 of the months during the year, in Phoenix. You can't shoot in the summer. And that was my shooting. It was all bench rest.
Cool.
And all of my experience, we were talking a little bit earlier with some of the guys about how difficult it is for them to shoot without all the crosshairs in their scope. I shot for a decade with 2 hairs.
Yeah.
That's it. And never cranked a knob. Oh my gosh, you don't crank knobs in bench rest? Never, you hold. And so by the time I got into F class, by the time I went hunting, and by the time I got exposed to Brian, and we start talking trajectories, because bench rest, it's 100, 200. Yeah. You click it to position it. I'm not clicking mils or minute of angle. I want it on about the 3rd ring. Yeah. So that's what I was clicking for. I wasn't clicking for anything. I was moving my hair to give myself a position on a target that was generally where I liked it to land. And so I had the weirdest experience with scopes. The first F-class match I ever went to, Mid Tompkins, was sitting there coaching a guy. And I was standing behind him, and I saw Mid, and he's down in the scope. And he reaches down, and he actually turns the guy's scope. I about my pants. If I can say that. I'm sorry. I did, because you do not touch scopes at bench rest matches.
Oh, funny.
You never touch your scope. Matter of fact, if somebody else touches a scope, you assume he's messing with somebody.
Yeah.
You know, so that's absolutely taboo. And for me, I'm sorry, I said it was a bench rest match. It wasn't a bench or a F-class match. It wasn't an F-class match. It was a high power match. So it was a palm match. And so he was turning around, he was reaching down and adjusting somebody's sights, because it's Mid Tompkins, right? To him, it was just a Tuesday or a Saturday. You know, it was just him being mid. But to me, it was, oh my gosh. And so my point is, my exposure to shooting gave me a very different perspective to shooting than many of the people that I talk to. You know, many of the people that I talk to, they start with rimfire. They might shoot at squirrels or rabbits, and they might get into hunting, and then they don't like certain things that happen while they hunt, and so they look into competition to see maybe if they can learn a bit more, and that's sort of the more normal progression-ish.
Yep.
Mine was bench rest.
Wow.
I'm shoulder to shoulder with Walt Berger, Tony Boyer, Lester Bruno, all the huge names in bench rest, and I'm shooting against those guys and getting crushed. Yeah. I mean, I did eventually start doing well. I ended up second at the Cactus, and I was a top shooter at the Super Shoot, first time shooter. I was in the top 20. So I've had my successes, and I was very proud of those. But bench rest is a very different game. I mean, it's you're off. You're anymore. If you are shooting at 100 yards and you see paper between two holes, you're done.
Oh, wow.
And you still got 22 more shots to go.
Wow.
You know, for the day, for that, just that yardage.
Yeah.
And there's three more of those. So
Wow.
it's a very unforgiving discipline, and that's what I was brought up in. And so when I think about making bullets, I think about things in terms of bench rest. I think about things in terms of precision, not because that's the way to do it. I'm not saying, oh, everybody needs to be a bench rest shooter. Everybody needs to go for quarter minute of angle. I'm just saying I know that I've done it.
Yeah.
I know that it's possible. Quarter minute is possible.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Now, quarter minute all day, I love that statement.
Oh, my
It's quarter minute all day.
Yeah.
I love that.
Like, okay.
Yeah, quarter minute is possible, but it's hard.
Yep.
But if you can do it, that means it's possible. It means it can be done. And I'm a big believer in what one man can do, another man can do. So it's just a matter of
I love that.
of pushing. Yeah, it's if I know somebody can do something, then it's just a matter of figuring out how. That's really all it is. And so that was a big part of me growing up, is thinking that it was normal to care about something at a level that really isn't. You know, because I was being told what was important by Walt Berger, and I had no idea that there was any other concept. And Walt Berger, that man lived, breathed, slept, drank, bench rest.
Nice.
Everything was bench rest to him. He was fanatical about it. And so as far as he was concerned, there was nothing like bench rest. He was 91 years old. He died when he was 94. No, I think he was 87. He was in his late 80s, early 90s. This was when I wasn't as directly involved in some ways. But he was at the NBRSA National Championships, and he got his 20th Hall of Fame point. Now, to get a Hall of Fame point, you have to win a yardage at a national match. And there's a couple other ways to do it, but that's one of the things. So he had 19. Now, you only need 10. So he had been a Hall of Fame member for quite a while. He had 19. He got his 20th. And I just thought that was so cool. And so I called him, and I'm like, Walt, I'm so happy you got your 20th Hall of Fame point. He's like, yeah, Eric, you know what? And I know what I did wrong. I just got to tighten my neck tension a little bit. And I'm like, all right, you know, it's
awesome.
And the thing was, it didn't even surprise me. That's how he was, is everything could always be made better. And so that was my upbringing. It was
That's rad.
really chaotic and feral in the very, very beginning. And then a girl sort of opened me up to the possibilities of family and life and having something that's more important than me be a part of my existence, and that was thrilling to me. So it's been that way ever since.
So I take it you had kids.
I have 2 girls.
Okay,
yes, I did.
cool.
Yeah, 2 girls, two beautiful girls, and I've got a granddaughter who I'm just
Awesome.
absolutely in love with.
Sweet.
That kid is crazy, crazy cute. But yeah, so I've got 2 daughters, and they're wonderful, and we thoroughly enjoyed them over the, they're older now. They've both moved out, and
Yeah.
one's a teacher and the other one's raising her granddaughter or her daughter, our granddaughter. I was gonna say, she's just a granddaughter. She's not really her daughter. She's my granddaughter. Really, that's the thing.
Nice.
And I've always loved being a father. And my dad was around. He lived in Phoenix. Our family is incredibly introverted. I'm introverted. I can discuss things with people, and I very much enjoy people. I like smaller groups better than bigger groups typically. But my family, our conversations are very short. We don't really go deep into much. Yeah. And so my dad and I reconciled later in life, but earlier on there was a lot of anger and there was a lot of difficult conversations, or difficult attempts at conversations, but there was a lot of anger and resentment then. And being a father was something that was incredibly important to me from very early on. At one point, it was because I felt I had to right some wrongs. I wasn't trying to get back at my father. I felt like it was something that had to happen in the existence that I experienced. Yeah. It was just something that I had to make right. What I eventually came to appreciate it was about how I can't emphasize enough the importance of purpose. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And wanting something more for someone else and for something else is such a powerful thing. Yep. And I don't know why. I mean, what I mean by that is I went through some difficult times. I've wrestled with self-harm. I've gone through some of that, particularly during some of the later burger stuff. But it was the idea of I never really could wrestle with the idea that I had significant relevance. I always felt like, well, I'm here, but I never really had my focus was never really on myself. Matter of fact, I was more destructive when I was thinking only of myself and there wasn't really much influence around me. I became destructive. But when I turned that around and I turned that towards others, that's what fathering became to me. Is I wanted so much for the people around me to be happy and successful. And it's not just about, giving them stuff and
almost the opposite of that, right?
Well, and that, and my kids, if one of my kids were here so my thing was, I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to teach you is what I would say. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to teach you. And they'd start cringing right now if they heard that, because that was their trigger thing. Yeah. But it was trying to help them grow and be something significant, be something that they could find happiness in. And that was a big part of what I became.
For sure.
After that, rough start.
Speaking of purpose, what is your stance as far as like your purpose on life, and do you have faith? What does that look like for you?
Well, I wrestle with faith. Yeah. I do. I'm a non-practicing optimist in that regard, I guess, in the sense that I will never accept the notion that I understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. That to me is a non-starter. Mm-hmm. I don't know what's happening. Yeah. I'm confident that whatever is happening is much greater than I am. Yeah. The part that I wrestle with is, I might have mentioned earlier that I got kicked out of private Catholic school. Oh yeah. I got expelled. Yeah. And the reason why I got expelled is because apparently I had poked a nun with a pencil. Yeah. Now that didn't happen. And when it was supposed to have occurred, that was in front of a bunch of people, including my own cousin. It didn't happen. But I was such a horrible kid. That's just the reason they gave. Yeah, for sure. They had plenty of opportunity. They had plenty of desire to get me out the door. Well, I struggled with situations where somebody put themselves between me and whatever is important in this universe. And not because I think I'm more important than them, but I really struggle with the fact that they're more important than me. Yeah. And it's not this. Yeah. It's like, if I'm important enough for that situation to be real, then what makes you more important in that regard? And I really struggled with that. And so, and I admittedly, I do struggle with authority type situations. Now, collaborative authority is beautiful. Yeah. Collaborative authority is is something that you can grow with. Yeah. Dominant authority
Yeah.
is a problem for me.
Yeah.
Especially if I can process dominant authority if we're heading the same direction. But once we stop heading in the same direction, I have a tendency to react badly to that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so much of what religion processes is dominant authority. You have to be this way because we think this is the way you should be. I struggle with that.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. And probably because I don't believe they know. I really don't. What I believe is something far greater. That's what I think. And that's the thing. It's one of the reasons why I can't put a name on it, because I think it's far greater than we all understand.
Yeah, I think that I mean, even the term religion, it's sort of a man-made concept, I think, of like what we perceive God to be. And I'd say the Catholic Church and other churches and denominations, they do create somewhat of a man-made system that puts people at different levels. When we're all sinful, we're all on the same level. I'm a Christian, and I think that Jesus died on the cross for our sins, and that gave us kind of that free ticket if we choose it, and there's really no sin greater than another in God's eyes. For us, we want to put it that way, right? We want to rank things. So if you're rebellious and then in a Catholic church, I mean, you're going to not. That's definitely a recipe for disaster for sure.
Yeah. Oil and water.
So I think a lot of people would feel that same way in that situation. So,
and I think I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking. Now, my daughter is very devout. She's Christian. She's highly active in her church. She worked there for a little while before she started teaching. She's a strong promoter of getting me involved, and I love her for it, and I appreciate her for it. And the thing that one of the things that I tell her is, I said, one of the problems that I have with what I know of religion is that everything I know about it came from another person. And I think I'll use God. Because I'm not uncomfortable saying that, but I've had this discussion with others before, and you try to keep it vague just because everybody's so damn sensitive. But I think God's far greater than that. I don't think a human could communicate accurately and effectively what God is. I really don't.
Yeah.
And so I struggle with somebody telling me what God is. And it's, so I know how I feel, and I know that there's a reason why all this is the way that it is. I believe that. I believe I don't know it. I believe anybody who's tried to tell me what it is with certainty doesn't know it as much as they might think they do. I completely respect people who believe. Like I believe a specific way. I grew up Catholic, so I lean more Christian than anything else. I've opened my mind to others just to see, because I once you get purpose and once you start exploring life, you sort of want to taste all the flavors, right? So I've looked at the different other religions, and I've not found anything that's interested me at all beyond Catholicism or Christianity. Catholicism I'm a little sour on, but Christianity. Although weirdly, I can't even begin to describe how excited I was when I heard that there was an American Pope. I have no idea why. No idea why. I'm like, USA, and no idea. And I heard he's been in Peru for 20 years. But there was something about it, and so so the idea of somebody telling me what God is, really, I struggle with. So it's I believe in morality. The thing that I was talking about this with my wife not too long ago. I am just absolutely confused, and to the point where I don't know really how to think about it or what to do about it. Why is the golden rule not the rule? Like it's like, well, it's so sing-songy. That's what little kids get told. If we all just treated each other like we wanted to be treated,
it's the beauty.
If anybody can, if people could even process that notion before they behave in some of the ways that they behave, the good that would cause. And so I believe that those things come from somewhere. Evil and good exist for a reason. Those activities, the things that people do to each other, in my opinion, exist for a reason. I don't think that this is all just some random, we're just falling backwards through space experiment. Maybe it is, and if it is, fine. I'm not going to live my life that way.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to decide that we're here for a reason.
Yeah.
And I'm going to decide that I do believe that there will be more to this.
Yeah.
Now, there are versions of that I think people, you know, what these people do when they think that if they martyr themselves in this life so that they can take advantage of the next one, I think those people are seriously misguided.
Yeah.
But those who understand the golden rule and understand its values and apply that to the people and the circumstances around them. I mean, people use words like karma, people use words like grace. There's just something in the universe that things start to make sense when people act that way.
Yeah.
Versus when they act against that. And when they act against that, you get chaos, you get problems, you get issues, you get pain, you get harm.
Yeah.
And I mean, harm comes in all kinds of different forms, and I accept that. But the fact is, there's no reason why we have to manufacture our own pain. There's enough pain. You know, there's enough pain when you find out your young child has a horrible disease, or you know, somebody that you love was in a car accident. You know, or there's plenty of natural pain, naturally occurring pain. We don't need to manifest it on our own, and that really shocks me when I hear some of the things that go on in the news and in the world. And I don't know if we wanted to go there, but
No, I mean, I think I like it because I think, I mean, there are two things that I totally agree with. One is purpose. And I think it'd be hard for anyone, regardless of their stance in life, to argue that purpose isn't a good thing. Just inherently, for whatever reason, purpose is good. And everyone should try to find purpose. Or tying into what my second point was, is wrestling with your purpose or what this world's about or what my life is about. Like the fact that you're wrestling with it is, you want purpose. You want to know what should I be doing with my life? How should I be treating people? Instead of just me, what can I do? Yeah. You know, like, and that's awesome. And I mean, we see it more than ever in our culture. Maybe it's just because we have it on our phones and we can see what everyone's doing, but a lot of people lack purpose, you know, and
well, and what's particularly scary is you have different versions of that. You have the YOLO versions, you know, that I'm just going to live carelessly and frivolously, and you know, I'm not gonna work to make my situation or any other situation better, whatever that might look like. There's those, and then there's another group where they don't value life at all. So it's not even a matter of I'm gonna overindulge and be this extraordinary person that's just gonna take advantage of all the, you know, the physicalistic, the hedonistic kind of things. On this other group, it's, well, life really isn't worth anything because this life isn't. This is a preview to some other circumstance. And I'm not saying that there isn't another circumstance. Matter of fact, I'm fully expecting that there is. But they're looking at it from the position that what's here is worth destroying. What here is worth causing harm to, because somehow this has no purpose. Or the purpose of it is to eliminate all that isn't like us. Yeah. And both of those are scary because the YOLO group, they miss things that are important. You know, they don't turn the gas off when the fire goes out in the stove, and so the house explodes. You know, that's a weird example, but they don't pay attention to things that are important, and so they end up causing themselves harm that they didn't even anticipate or expect. This group out here is seeking harm. They're seeking harm, and they're seeking harm for the benefit of something that they don't have any certainty on. And to me, whatever is making all of this what it is, if it is trying to get us to hurt each other, I don't want anything to do with it. There isn't anything about that that's smart or reasonable or acceptable. And why anybody could think that is, it's remarkable to me that there's a whole group of people that thinks that that's okay. And why that they can think that that's okay. And that it's like, yeah, you know what? Nope, that's just where we're at. And that's just our situation, and we're just going to accept it. Why? Yeah. It absolutely doesn't have to be that way. And that stuff really cooks me.
Well, I'm glad you found purpose through your wife, and I mean that's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably one of the things that's the highlight of your life, which is so cool.
It really was
to like have that.
Yeah, it really was.
A lot of people don't. That's a blessing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so there were periods when you lose that. So my life hasn't been one rosy
most people's isn't.
trajectory, right? And actually, with the bullet thing, I had anticipated being a part of making bullets until I wasn't able to work anymore, and and circumstances were such that we had to make some tough decisions, and then that resulted in what I thought was going to be really a great situation, and it turned out to be a really bad situation. And it felt like that purpose was being sucked away from me because I got so into doing that once the trajectory became clear that, this isn't going in a way that's going to work out, it sort of rocks you pretty hard. At least it did me. And so there was some real struggle there. And fortunately, she was there to help me through it. And she did. She was a big part of it, but it was pretty daunting. And so there was a period of time where I just, I had an opportunity to buy into Burger because Burger was sold and moved to California. And that owner fired me, but that owner was an idiot. He was the son of the guy who created the J4 jackets. Well, he was making some very poor financial decisions. And within 2 years, when Burger was sold, when Walt sold it to that guy, we were doing about $8 million a year. When I came back 2 years later, they were doing about $500,000 a year.
Wow.
So
what year was this?
This was 90.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So, excuse me. I'm sorry. I started in 90. So this was 2000.
Okay.
Yeah. So 2000 was when he bought it. Spivco bought it. And then by 2002, he sold it to the next owners who ended up hiring me back.
Wow.
And so within 2 years, now keep in mind, Burgers was one of, I think he had like 8 companies. He had a number, and the Spivco J4 Jackets was one product that ran on one machine. They had like 50 machines. I mean, they made tea candles, lipstick cups, paintbrush ferrules. I mean, they made all kinds of stuff. So it was a really big operation. So the what pulled him under wasn't Burger, but it was affected by it. And so the outfit that bought his entire operation, interestingly enough, they didn't even want Burger. But he kept putting it into the deal by moving assets around, and he kept trying to lace it into the deal, but they didn't want it. Well, eventually they got tired of it. They did want the bigger stamping operation, or the drawing operation. So they got tired of it, and they said, fine, just give us one price, and we'll just take the whole thing. Well, then they bought it in 2002, and they ran it for 2 years. So I didn't come back until 2004. And it was for 2 years, and Walt was still there. All the employees were gone. They actually absorbed it as part of was a division. Didn't have any payroll, didn't have any inventory. It was just a division of this bigger company. So Burger as a brand was the only thing that was hanging around. The company itself had been absorbed.
Wow.
And so they asked Walt, because he's still involved, hey, what do you think we can do to get this thing back going again? And they didn't even really care about it. They weren't Burger people. They weren't shooting people. They weren't bullets or anything like that. They didn't care at all. And Walt suggested, well, why don't you get a hold of Eric and see if he'd come back and get back involved. And so they did. Well, it was in California now. Well, my whole family, I got a big family. My wife's got some family, all the friends I didn't have many friends being an introvert, but all the friends that she had generated, she had no interest in leaving Phoenix. Why, I don't know, but whatever. And so I was like, well, I'll move to California, but I would need an opportunity to be able to buy into the company. And they did that. And so that all worked out. So we did move to California. I actually lived there for 2 years while we were there. And we ended up growing it back up, and everything was going great. And there were 2 brothers. One of them was fantastic. Mm-hmm. He was great. So we took it from $500,000 a year to $15 million a year in 10 years. And so this meteoric. It was fantastic. Everything was going well. Well, the brother died of cancer. And the other brother that ran the company was much more difficult to work with. And things became extremely hard. And so the whole situation sort of started falling apart. And there was no longer a collaboration with authority. There was this, he was going to be the boss and he was going to let me know. And how I felt about things wasn't even relevant. It was just, this is how we're going to do things. And I'm a great general. I can follow orders. That's not the problem unless they don't make sense. And a lot of this stuff didn't make sense.
Yeah.
And so the short story is that really is what led to us talking to NAMO. And NAMO reached out. I had no idea that this was even a possibility, but they reached out. And I was very excited about what that might produce because Lapua, it's like, oh my gosh, we could talk about collaboration with authority. Oh my, this is massive organization with all these engineers and all these things and all this great stuff. And we talked with them and the Norwegians were fantastic. And NAMO's owned 50-50 by Norway and Finland, the departments in their government.
Wow.
Now, Norway has the single share that gives them all the deciding factor. And so the Norwegians were the ones that we did the deal with. Well, then once the deal was done, everything was taken over by the Finns. Oh. And I don't know if you've heard any stories about Tika. I don't know if you've heard any stories about Finnish. Well, let's just say that they don't talk a lot until late at night when the drinking starts. Yeah. And I'm not offending any of them by saying this because they'll tell you this up front. And if you spend any time with a Finn, this is what you will experience. They don't say much throughout the day. But at night, when everybody eats and they start drinking, well, that's really when the conversations start. Wow. Well, some of those conversations are difficult to remember, right? Yeah. So it makes it tough to sort things out. Well, the other thing that happened is I've learned this later, but apparently Lapua is a place. It's a brand, but it's also the city that it's in. And within that city, they're extremely proud of the fact that they are Lapua, the brand. So much so that they are convinced, without exception, that they're better than everybody else, including Burger, including anybody that would ever think that. Well, that's not a great situation for me to be in and be successful. So we worked through that, and it became a problem. But anyway, the short version is all of those things led to it being clear that I really wasn't happy there at all, and it was affecting my health. And there was no clear path that was going to be different. Mm-hmm. So this was going to be the future of it, regardless. And so it's like, all right, well, I don't need to do this anymore. Once I made that decision, and I was like, well, then what am I going to do? And I started floating around in the world like, okay, well, I've been this bullet guy forever. I mean, my personal email is bulletmaker@, so that's what I was. Yeah. And now that purpose is gone. It just got sucked away. And that put me in a really, really dark place. And that made it very tough for a while. And interestingly enough, this whole stuff happens for a reason and all this kind of stuff. It got to the point where I'm like, I can't do nothing anymore. So if you think through the process, $500,000 when I come back, so Burger wasn't very expensive. But then at $15 million when it was sold, things worked out okay. Yeah. So I had an opportunity to just chill and just do whatever. Thing I found out about money, and I heard somebody else say this is not me, is whatever problems that you have, they make them worse. Mm-hmm. They don't make them better. Yeah. They make them worse. And it did. It absolutely did. And it created a huge problem for me. So I got to the point where I managed to get through that. And I was like, I need to find purpose again, and I've been married for a long time and I love my wife. My kids are grown, so that part of it, the family part of it, the pull wasn't as strong. I still love my family and it was involved, but it wasn't what allowed all that to fully make me excited about purpose again. And so one day I'm like, you know what? I'm going to find something to do. I don't care what it is. I'm going to find something to do. And I pop open Facebook, and the very first thing that I see on Facebook is an ad. Kelly McMillan is looking for a customer service person. Very first thing I see. Yeah. And I've worked with Kelly before. I knew Kelly. I've been to trade shows with Kelly, and so it was just remarkable how I got an answer. Yeah. And I wasn't even clear that I was asking a question, but I got an answer, and so I called him, and here we are. Yeah. And so I ended up getting involved with him, and it was great because I went in like I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm a bullet guy. I don't make stocks. Mm-hmm. I know manufacturing. I've done a ton in the The business side of it, I know super well. You know, that part of it I've done a lot with. But the actual act of making stocks, it was new to me. I mean, I wasn't sure where it was going to go. And so I just went, hey, just give me a customer service job. Let's see where this goes.
Yeah.
And it didn't take very long for that purpose to be infused again and for me to start feeling really excited about stuff again. And so then I started talking about what was going on, where I was. You know, of course I was doing my job, but much like, so
You're probably over here. What's going on?
well, there's the
over
thing.
here?
So, you know, 30 years earlier, I'm in Walt's chair making bullets going, what's this and what's this? And so now I'm in McMillan, you know, answering phone calls, talking to people like, what's this? What's this? And I had a bit more experience at this point, and so I could ask some sort of pointed questions and offer some perspective. And, you know, wasn't too long after that he wanted me to be general manager. And, you know, and then Bob got it. Well, Bob and he were already talking. Bob and Kelly Bob and Kelly and I and Kevin Brown, who was at Night Force at the time, we worked very closely with him. There was a sort of a group at one point where we all wanted the same things, and we all sort of felt like we were cut from the same cloth. And so we all liked being at the same places and sort of helping each other in any way that we could, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And so that group was sort of cohesive. And so the fact that McMillan was the thing that popped up in front of me for me to become an opportunity of. Bob and I are good friends. You know, we've been working together for a very long time. Kelly and Bob were good friends. Well, more father-son-ish. You know, Bob and I are good friends. Kelly and Bob were more father-son-ish. And they had been talking about Bob being the one to buy McMillan when Kelly was ready for years prior. And so, you know, sort of another answer shows up, and Bob says he wants to take this thing further. Kelly's feeling more ready. I'm in the building, and, you know, planets sort of start lining up. And then, you know, Kelly decides to make his change. And, you know, Bob is a very passionate, very enthusiastic guy. And he has a very exciting vision. And so not too long later, we get involved in Defiance, and, you know, we have more plans and we're doing more things. And so, and I got that purpose back again.
That's good. That's awesome. I love to hear that.
Yeah.
What year was the McMillan? When did you go to McMillan?
So McMillan, it was 2019. 2017 when we sold. Late 2019 when I got involved with McMillan. I was there for about 4 months when COVID hit. So was that December 23? So no, it would have been, that was December of 19 because it sort of went through 20. So it was late 19. And then, so I was there when all the COVID stuff hit, and we were having to talk about whether we were going to shut down and all that stuff. So I was involved in during that period. And so that's when I started with Kelly, was that 2020 COVID hit. And
I think so this leads us right into Defiance. What year was that?
That was 22.
22
years. That was 2 years later.
So and it's this has been all good for me and for all of us to get to understand the way that you do things, because when you guys took over Defiance, there was a lot of controversy.
Oh, right? Yeah.
Like I've been pretty active on Sniper Side for a long time, and there's always controversy on Sniper Side. People say it like it is, right?
You can count on it, right?
Dude, 100%. People are going to say it like it is. There's going to be controversy.
Right.
And I've seen a lot of it come and go, and there's big meme wars and all this stuff. The thing that was odd in that it was just different from the way all the other companies handled it. You came on there and just told the truth. You just told everybody what was going on, and people didn't want to hear it, but it was very odd because I'm watching the guy that's running Defiance. Just all of a sudden he shows up on Sniper Side telling us all exactly what's going on. And I appreciated it a lot. And that's why I wanted to get this history of you and like kind of understand what type of man you are, that you'll just come on and tell the truth to people. And I think I'd be interested now to just to kind of get a little before you guys took over and after, kind of like how that went down, and you know, anything that you're willing to share with us on it, because there was a lot of us that were Defiance supporters before, and then for me, after you guys took over, it made me even more so.
Well, I appreciate that. That was really interesting, and it was a great learning experience. So I don't believe I have a great memory, and so for me, the truth has always been easier to remember. And there's no way to bullshit away what happened. we got involved in Defiance. So the short version, when we got involved in Defiance, the condition was X. And by the time it was an interesting deal. By the time the deal finally came about, and this is a year later, it was very much not X. It was a very, very different situation. And when I was at Burger, one of the things that Walt taught me from the very beginning was there's no reason to charge unfairly for something that you do, because the whole point is for you to live your life and all that kind of stuff. It's not about taking advantage of people. I've had and have an amount of money that I could make different decisions. The thing I found out is it doesn't change anything. Money, if I had 100 times the amount of money I have right now, I wouldn't feel any differently. And what I mean by that, that's Jim Carrey said one time that money is one of the worst things that can happen to somebody. And people are like, well, okay, whatever. Yeah. And he says, and I'm the only guy that can tell you that, because he's the guy that got the big money. And if you look at him now, he's living an interesting life, because he's wrestling with the fact that he thought money was going to make him happy, and it absolutely doesn't. And so my point in saying all of that was, Walt didn't want to be wealthy. He just didn't want to be hungry. He was a depression era guy. And so his whole push was always price things fairly. Everybody's out there doing their best. The whole golden rule thing. Yeah. We just want to do what we do, make enough so we can take care of our obligations, and have enough to do what we're doing just like everybody else is. That's how you do things. And so that was a very cornerstone idea in my youth. And you got to remember, I started working for Walt when I was 19 years old. So, and my dad and I were estranged. So I had no father figures in my life. And Walt very much was that. And I loved what I did so much. And now Walt was a hard man. He was a very hard man. And I appreciate that, because he didn't hold anything back. And he taught me a lot of things. But he gave me an opportunity to understand that it doesn't matter what somebody else thinks is important if you're doing what you believe is important. And so going into things that way, and I got a little bit philosophical on you there.
No,
but
it's okay.
Looking at things that way, that becomes your basis. So everything has to be a certain way, because that's the way it's supposed to be. And so then when you start looking at information, and then so you fast forward over the years, and every time we ever broke anything down in terms of cost, in terms of how much we should charge for something, we always made what we needed to, but never really more than that. And so that's why the pricing for Burger has always been, at one point it was very rounded off numbers, and then it became super specific down to the penny. And all of that came from holding to that core idea and understanding that we're just going to charge the same. If we make more of a bullet and it costs us less to make it as a result, well, then it costs the customer less too. And so that was applied across the board. It was about fairness. Well, fast forward to when I became part of Burger, and it was this other company. Now that company, they owned a bunch of other companies. And so they had us reviewing the books of all the other companies. And every month, once a month, we would have a day-long meeting where I was the president of Burger, and the president of Superbrush and the other companies that they have would come together, and we would have these meetings, and I would have to present on all of the things that had happened the month prior in a financial report. And so did everybody else. And they did that on purpose so that we could learn from each other's mistakes and grow from each other's strengths. And so I had an incredible exposure to how you can make companies healthy. And that was a wonderful experience. Well, then fast forward to the Namo era. When Namo took over, I was part of that for 2 years. We had financial meeting reviews in Spain. We had financial meeting reviews in Norway. I did that same thing with all the Namo companies on the commercial side. Not all of them, but just the commercial companies. And we'd have meetings where we'd go through all of it. And so I got a ton of exposure to what makes companies healthy and what makes companies grow. And then I go to Defiance. Yeah. And what I see, I'm absolutely panicked. We just got the keys to this plane, and it's pointed right at the ground. And now the learning experience part is that there are ways to survive that situation without doing what we did. And that's just the truth. I didn't see that in the moment I was in. And so when I was asked, you know, I was the person that was responsible for the health of the operation. When I was asked, what is it that we need to do? Change the prices, absolutely. Well, and they did one quick change like 9 months before we took over, but Defiance's prices hadn't changed for the entire period of time that it had been open, like 12 years, 10 years. And so we need to change these prices. And I'm looking at the cash situation that we have, and I'm like, and we need to change the prices on the order shipping out the door right now, or this whole thing goes away. And when you're in those moments where your options are two, live or die, then you can rationalize things like, well, this is what's necessary, so we'll just have to help people understand it. I actually had convinced myself that if I could just explain it, if I could just explain it to all these guys, everything will be just fine. That was an interesting lesson because that's not what happened. The retro part, and that was really the part that went wrong. It wasn't the price change. If we would have changed the price and we said why, and it goes into effect on the next action that you get and all that kind of stuff, then people could make choices. That's different. What we did was we said, we're giving you a problem. So now either you're going to have to eat a sandwich that you didn't plan on eating, or you're going to have to tell one of your customers that they're going to have to eat a sandwich that you didn't plan on eating. That's what we did wrong. That's what I did wrong. And so understanding that you can't, again, golden rule comes back to it. Treat people how you'd want to be treated. I wasn't strong enough in putting myself in their position to understand how much pain and difficulty that would cause them, to understand how my decision, I couldn't have made that decision if I fully understood that and if I fully appreciate it. That's where I failed. And that's when I said on that podcast that I fucked up, that's what I screwed up. I didn't put myself deep enough in their shoes, and I didn't adhere to the golden rule strong enough in that instance rather than the other ones. In the circumstance, the pressure was intense.
Man,
and so,
I appreciate you taking ownership over that. But at the same time, you're thinking about the employees. Right? You're thinking about this company that is potentially going to be taken out of the market, and like what would happen to all the other custom action manufacturers. They're going to get a little bit more business, but they're not going to be able to ramp up to keep up with the production that Defiance was providing to the market, right? So I understand, and I appreciate you taking responsibility that, like, hey, we should have done this a little bit different. At the same time, it was pretty dire straits situation.
Well, certainly, but those are the natural. When I talked about natural bad things happen, that's one of those natural bad things. I accept that I have to process hardship sometimes, and I accept that I have to process hard truths sometimes. That's just a part of me being here. I accept that, and I can do that. And there are times where you need to, and it's like, okay, I'm going to take this one on the chin, and this is what's going to happen. In that instance, had I understood the effect that it would have, the reaction that it had, and had I appreciated the significance of the circumstance, it would have been very different. And I say it's important to say things are better now, a lot better now, because we took an active role in making those things right. The people who were affected financially by that decision, we reached out to them to make that right in real dollars. I'm not talking about, oh, we're so sorry. Like the BP exec, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Out of South Park does a thing. But, so it wasn't that. It was, we know, because we know what you ordered. We know what you would have paid. We know what you did pay. We know what this cost you. So we're willing to engage in this situation to make this right, to make it right with you. And we did that on purpose, because once I understood fully what had happened and I understood my role in that situation, I'm like, I got to fix this. And so that's how we fixed it. It was, we basically have to pay this back. And I appreciate the whole, I don't want to make it sound like I don't appreciate the fact that people are kind about what happened, because I do. But the fact is, people who make mistakes, when I make mistakes, I want to wear that. I want to I want to own that mistake in the sense that I don't make it again. That's really important. And so I don't want that mistake to ever be softened, because I don't ever want to fall in the trap of not recognizing it again as a mistake.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate. That's one of the reasons why, if you can call anything that I've done success, one of the reasons why I'm as successful as I am is because I've made a lot of them.
Yeah.
A lot of mistakes, but I know them. I own them. And that's important. I don't think you should ever let yourself off the hook.
Yeah.
And try whatever. That doesn't mean I don't mean that all the time, but in circumstances where something is really important, that's a lesson I ought never to forget, ever.
Yeah.
And because it hurt people, and that's what's important about it. And so that's why I definitely appreciate that. And so many people have been so kind, and I appreciate that aspect of it. But I don't want to dial it down.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that stance on it
for my own benefit. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm thankful to see Defiance continuing. Like just this weekend here, like how many employees do you have here? How many people are you guys feeding and taking care of? The employees that I know, it's a family there, and it's not just, you guys aren't just some big corporate machine. There's a bunch of good people there, and you guys take very good care of them. It's a difficult place to live in Montana with cost of living in that, and you take care of people. So again, I'm appreciative to see Defiance continuing, right? And then not only that, like the way you guys support the shooting sports, right? Like this is something that we're very passionate about, is shooting PRS and NRL and RTC and all that. And you guys have, Defiance before you has supported the shooting sports, but you guys came in and continued, if not upped it. And it's great, right? It's just it allows all these people who are passionate about this sport, whether it's hunting or matches or whatever it is, to it just like, there's stories I could go on and on, but like Norm down there, you guys gave an action to, and then everybody donated their prize table walk, and he walked away with a rival. It's just like this community of amongst that. I guess Defiance has fostered that. I'm appreciative of.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, again, it's that. I mean, I don't want to sound silly, but it's that whole golden rule thing. It's you have to be able to sustain the business, or you don't get to do any of those things.
Yep.
But once you've established that, then as often as you can, you should make people's lives better. And I don't know why that's such a central theme to me, but it's the notion of making things better, being a builder. I love the idea of being a manufacturer. I love being a builder. I don't like destroying things. I don't like breaking things down. I like making them better. And so Defiance has such a great group of people. I mean, I didn't know them as well as I do now back then, but I had no idea how lucky we were to I'll name him now, because in this case he deserves every credit. Glenn did a fantastic job of putting together a team that is remarkable, and the idea of this doing well is a part of that. And the fact that we're able to continue that with this group of people, and then because the thing when you get a group of people like this, and they go out and shoot, they connect with others, and it's remarkable how many like-minded people there are in a world where it seems like everybody's against each other.
Yeah.
And when you find those like-minded people, it's hard not to celebrate with them. And I'll give you one example. So bench press F class, and I'm gonna forget their names, and I'm gonna hate myself for this. My memory. But so I'm here at the very first antisocial match that I've been to.
Yep.
And I'm walking around and I'm watching everybody. I'm watching team shooters shoot together. And I'm just learning. I'm just observing. And being a bench press shooter and an F-class shooter, all this stuff is alien to me. And as I'm watching these team shooters shoot, it looks really hard because it's difficult to coordinate your activity. You're moving into position, moving out of position. And it was a struggle for everybody that I was watching until I came across the Clonagers. I watched the Clonagers shoot, and man, it was like a dance. And, the one hand lifts up and the other hand lifts down, and the bag gets set out of the way. And it was just so fun to watch. And I'm like, okay, I'm starting to pick up on differences in preparation is what I'll call it, because I think they're all skilled, but it's differences in preparation. But then there's 2 young girls here, and I hate the fact that their names have slipped out of
Gwen and Ari.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
The Millers.
I watched them shoot, a bit later. And one of them had a little, something that they got a little bit hung up on something. And the way that she just kicked in and grabbed the rifles, and it was as if they had practiced it 100 times. These 14?
Yeah, they're
13?
they're young at that time. Yeah.
They're young girls. And I'm watching this. I was so overwhelmed by it. I was so connected with what it took for them to do that, because those are children. That came from their efforts and their parents' efforts.
Yeah.
I was so impressed. As soon as I got back off the line, I knew right away those 2 girls were getting 2 actions.
Nice.
And I don't care. They don't have to wear a Defiance shirt ever again.
Yeah. That's awesome.
That was such a beautiful thing to see for me.
Yeah.
And for somebody who gets passionate about this kind of stuff, I was overwhelmed with it. And
awesome.
that was just the right thing to do in that moment. And I went and I said, Chad, because Chad's so great.
Yeah.
I said, Chad, hey, I just saw something. And I told him, he's like, oh yeah, those guys. And he knows them, He's like, oh, they're great. He's like, well, they're already shooting that stuff. I don't care. I don't care.
That's awesome, man.
They need to, and so my point in saying that is these opportunities present themselves where you can do what you should be doing based on why we're here. And I think the reason that we're here is to be together. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that now, being an introvert, I'm not a big social guy. That's not it at all. It's being together in the sense that we're all here trying to make each other happy and healthy and improve and do better.
Yeah.
Anybody that's trying to tear that down is in another camp. I'm very excited about the camp that's wanting to work collaboratively. That's why I love that word, collaboration. Mm. And it comes in many forms. And just the notion of connecting and facilitating and helping and growing, just that whole concept, applying that to anything that you do produces positives. Mm. Sometimes it's positive material things, sometimes it's positive emotional process, sometimes it's positive thoughts, whatever. It produces things that are positive. And if you just do enough of that, then everybody's okay.
Yep.
And that's really all we can ask for. And then we just experience this and we enjoy our families, and then, we pass on to the next phase.
Yeah.
So
I'll have you just bring your mic up just a little bit because it slid down. But I think, for any brand, but I think you guys are doing a good job at it, is like being a brand that when a customer interacts with it feels like it's actually run by humans, people that care, people that are willing to do things that are not ones and zeros on a balance sheet, and I think you guys have done a good job of having unique personalities, but also being a cohesive unit that obviously cares about shooters and cares about people. And so, that's super cool. So
appreciate that.
As far as where Defiance and McMillan are headed, give us a little insight into the vision for what's next.
Well, Michael Jackson's going to play, or Michael Jordan's going to play how he plays.
Yeah.
Charles Barkley is going to play how he plays. Shaq's going to play how he plays. I've been given the rock. I only know one way to go forward. Find out what your customers want and give it to them. Mm. Yeah. And so we've had our ears open. We've been asking questions. We've been working with different shooters, and we've been getting as much feedback as we can. And so our focus is on building products that are responding to what our customers are telling us. So on the McMillan side, we've got 3 new stocks that have been introduced. We've got the Mountain Tracker, which is really purposed for more tripod shots, more standing shots, more of the more off the tree kind of shots. Whereas the Mountain Tracker LR is more for the prone. Mm-hmm. So the butt's different, the angles are different. It's set up for somebody who's going to be taking more prone shots. And so those 2 stocks, a ton of feedback came from different people about how we should incorporate some more modern approaches, and modern approaches in the sense of, like if you look at a Corvette, you got your Stingrays, and they have these rounds and these interesting things. And now you look at your new Corvettes,
Sharp.
and they're sharps, and so that kind of thing, you know, that kind of concept. Let's make it look more modern style while incorporating McMillan's, you know, lifetime guarantee quality and incorporating these features that people are asking for. And so it's the 2 mountain trackers, and then we have the ALR Hunter. And so those 3 stocks are the most recent versions of this effort to purposefully try to focus on what customers are asking for. Kelly was a great guy. I have a tremendous amount of respect for what he did in the industry. He tended to like to do things that he wanted, you know, what he felt would be the best thing. I have the wonderful fortune of not being a stock maker. I'm a bullet guy. So all I can do is find out what everybody wants and just, okay, we'll just do that then.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're doing. And so right now, those 3 are the most recent additions. We've got many in the pipeline. We've got a committed R&D person with a team that works in a few different departments. And so we're very excited about what's coming out with McMillan. And it's heavy on what people are asking for. And we want people to tell us. We're encouraging people, you know, with as many circumstances that I've been in, particularly with Burger, to be complimented on the success people achieve with a particular product. That's never really interested me because I can't make something better that's already good. You know, somebody says, "Oh man, this shoots better than anything I've ever used." Okay, I appreciate that. I can't do anything with it. When somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, I've got a problem," my ears are wide open. I want to know everything that person has to say because we want to address it. And so that's what we're taking into this future effort. And we're going to be introducing products that address everything that we've ever heard. Palms are too big, reach is too long, or you know, the handed finger is too long.
Awesome.
The shapes are too plain, you know, all those things. We hear it all, and believe me, we are working towards all of those things very aggressively.
Yeah, I got the mountain tracker as soon as I could get one made when they came out, and it's been awesome. I mean, I've loved it. It's as good, and I think at least from what I've seen until recently, like Manners has kind of, I think, dominated the stock side of things, and they've been innovative and they've, you know, done things. And I think the mountain tracker was kind of, I had a McMillan stock on my very first rifle, and it was awesome. Then I had Manners, and then it was kind of the mountain tracker. I was like, oh, I want to try that. And it's sometimes those products and changes inside the company, and like I think you guys are doing some really awesome things. How do you discern what voices to listen to, though? Because you go stand at any stage or any rifle match, and there's 1,000 opinions on what something should be and how it functions and what all the things should be. So, like, how do you guys discern and distill this giant, massive, this is what it should be, down to what you finally come out with?
Well, that's incredibly difficult, especially with stocks, because like we have, McMillan has a tremendous advantage in the sense that we've got some people, in particular the GM Varian. Varian has been with McMillan for quite a long time. The guy is a wizard with stocks. I mean, it's remarkable what this guy, he could look at a box of 24 with all the noses down. All you can see is the pad, and he can tell you exactly what every one of them is. I mean, that's just a simple thing. The guy is phenomenal in that regard.
Yeah.
One of the biggest challenges with stocks, you know, in the bullet world, performance is on the target.
Yeah.
You know, it's dispersion.
Yeah.
And so those arguments are simple, you know, because it's BC, it's dispersion. And, you know, basically the discussion's settled.
Yeah.
With stocks, you got different body shapes, different body types, different configurations. And so it's not only just what features are significant, because like ARCA, you know, ARCA's all the rage. I heard a guy at the Western Expo say, I put ARCAs on everything, you know. I don't know why.
If you talk to really stuff, they're like, it's not ARCA, it's 1.5 inch dovetails.
Well, I guess my point is, it's one thing to talk about a feature. An aspect that makes that even more difficult is how do you fit that feature into the bell curve of body configurations?
Oh yeah.
And even more challenging than that is personal preferences. Because with bullets, all you care about is the performance on the target. Some people like orange stocks. Some people hate orange stocks. And so which one do you show? Which one do you make? You know, it's an incredibly difficult thing. And so where I feel McMillan is in a very strong position is because it's been around, 51 years, 50, so 70, was it 71, 54 years? No, that's me. 73. Sorry. So 52 years.
Yeah.
And the people who we have people who have been in that company for 30 years and they're still working there today.
Wow.
So they've experienced a lot. And that doesn't answer all of our questions, but what it does is it offers some perspective. And so then when we put this all together, it's like, well, what is going to be the next best thing? And I think, I don't think this. What is going to happen, or what you see happening, I think in all stock manufacturers, is they make a version of something that addresses some of it. Because you can't really, you can't address all of it, because then you have a stock that isn't real.
Yep.
But you address as much of a particular thing as you can. That's why the mountain tracker is meant for tripods and more upright shots, whereas the mountain tracker LR is meant for more prone shots. Can you shoot an LR off of a tripod? Certainly. Can you shoot just a straight up tracker prone? Certainly. Will they feel different when you do them? Yes. And so we're just trying to create products that address as many of the objectives as possible while focusing specifically on what is it that they're trying to accomplish. And so we're getting a lot of that. And one thing I'll share is that a lot of the innovation that took place within McMillan that was well received by the customers were things that Varian actually had put forward sort of on the sly. Because Kelly felt very strongly about what Kelly felt strongly about. And so if he wanted something to happen, it did. And if he didn't want something to happen, it didn't.
Wow.
Well, Varian is an incredibly passionate stock maker. He is to stocks what I was to bullets. There's no question. I see it in him every day. The things that happened before that were some of the bigger successes that McMillan had achieved were innovations that Varian had actually initiated and was working through the system. And then once they're real, he goes in and says, "Hey, what do you think about this, Kelly?" And Kelly's like, "Oh, that's pretty sweet." And it's already real. So, and then that's what becomes real. So it's a combination between listening, and having people who have done it long enough that they know how to achieve what that request is. Because it's one thing for somebody to ask for the perfect stock. And the thing that I love that we hear is the next one. Everybody wants the one with the next cool thing, the next big deal. We do that, never stop. We're trying to do that in literally every stock. And so when everybody's trying to make the next big deal thing, and you're listening as best you can, you need somebody who can actually manifest that into something real. And I had the distinct advantage of having met and been able to connect with Brian Litz when I was with Burger. And that is, as far as I'm concerned, that's the greatest thing that happened to Burger Bullets was Brian Litz.
Awesome.
And the design perspective that he brought and the connection with the customer. Because really quickly, Brian Litz is a aeronautics engineer who is on a skill level where he could have gone into the most exciting fields, the most stereotypically exciting fields that you can think of. When I met him, he was working as a contractor for the Air Force, working on projects to reverse engineer enemy rockets so that we could shoot them down from other planes. How cool is that, right? It's like, that would be like the coolest thing in the world. He, from very young, it's one of these deals, when he was 4 years old, he just had this thing about hitting things far away with rifles.
Nice.
It just was something that was just in him. And so even though he was doing this rock star job and he's at a level, ballistics is a very mature science. The science of it. Now, how you apply it was different, but the science of it is very mature. For somebody to have that level of knowledge and to throw their career away on ballistics, why would they bother? So we all benefited. The entire shooting community benefited from the fact 100%. That somebody with that level of knowledge was willing to help us with small arms ballistics, and he exploded it. He took it to a new level. Within a very short period of time of Brian and I working together formally, because we worked as a contractor. It's a funny story. Yeah, Sierra tried to hire him, all this kind of stuff. First, Sierra actually tried to hire him first, but he ended up with us. He provided me with these charts that I'll mess it up. He used a methodology that he understands to basically plot where all of the holes were in the bullet market. And when I saw this thing, I understood it immediately. And it was so, now I couldn't have manifested it, but I understood what he was saying. And it was so beautiful. I had it made into like a 1/4-inch thick poly poster.
Oh, cool.
And I put it up on my wall in my office, and that was what we were going to make. And that's, so at that time, all of the bullets that were introduced from that time until I left came from that chart.
Wow.
He had envisioned all of those things. Now we had like, there's a column bench rest bullet that came out of a need and that kind of stuff, but he had envisioned 95% of all the bullets that we made for a very long period of time, because he had such a strong connection as a customer, you know, as a firearms enthusiast who wanted to put bullets down range, who understood them at a level that could manifest that kind of list. We're all lucky that was real. So in this case at McMillan, I am intractable on the position of being interested in what the customers want, but I don't know how to manifest what the customers want. And I knew how to form it, but I didn't know how to create what Brian created. I knew how to squish the metal. I just didn't know how to create. But fortunately in McMillan, we've got variant.
Awesome.
And so that's going to be a really big part of McMillan going forward, is that collaboration. Yeah. It's people. Yeah. You know, you put together a team of capable, passionate people, and there's not much that can stop them.
For sure.
You know, it's just the way that's sort of always works out that way.
That's awesome.
Current administration included.
Yes. I'm curious, a couple things. What are you excited about coming up? Whether Defiance, McMillan, personal life, what do you got coming up that you're excited about?
Well, I'm very excited about both Defiance and McMillan, where they are right now. You know, we went through some rocky waters. Defiance more publicly. You know, McMillan, we had to sort some things out, and that's normal. You know, not all. I've not been on a path that's been straight. You know, it's always like this. I'm very happy with where both companies are now. And what I mean by that is they're positioned very well. The culture is in tune with understanding what the customers want. The businesses are in a position to manifest it. You know, you have to move things around. You have to put people in positions where they have strengths, and you have to make things so that these systems function properly. We're there now with both companies. So we're in a position now to really start doing some exciting things. Those things are already occurring. You know, we've got those 3 stocks. We've got more in the pipe, and there's actually one here being given away as the raffle that I didn't know was even going to be released. It's a stock that doesn't exist in the world yet. I mean, cool. So we put a few of them out there just to see, but like it's not publicly known that this thing even exists, and we're giving away a rifle. The raffle rifle has that stock on it. So awesome. So that's another one of these stocks that there's more of them coming. On the Defiance side, you know, when we first took over, with the way the sales were and the way the back orders were and everything was sort of chaotic, we discontinued the CRF. We discontinued a few other products. The 3-position safety. Yep. So we discontinued a few things that weren't big volume, but they were things that people wanted that aren't really available. There are some other versions, but there aren't a lot of other versions. And so I'm very excited about the fact that we're re-engaging those things, but in a way, there's a reason why we stopped making them then. There were some difficulties with making them that were not easily overwhelmable then. But now we've got like the CRF that we've come out with. It's a modified version. It's not the same version.
Yeah.
So we're more capable at making this new version. This new version does a few cool things that I'm not technically knowledgeable enough to explain, but they've been explained to me, and I understand the words they use. I'm not smart enough in that area to be able to regurgitate them. But that's very exciting. We're going to be doing something in that realm, another new thing in that realm that I think is going to be really exciting, that people are going to be, certainly a group of people are going to be very interested in, but just as a, oh, that's cool, kind of thing. We just want to keep doing cool things. Defiance was not to make titanium actions ever, and now we make two.
Nice.
We make two of them. So the notion that we're taking both brands to places that are customer focused is something I am very excited about. That's a purpose I can buy into.
That's awesome.
And so that is very exciting. Now, my personal life, I am so happy to be a grandfather.
Yes.
I mean, that little kid, she just melts me. And the time I spend with her is pure gold. And so I'm really grateful to be in the position that I'm in, because I've got a lot of wonderful people around me who are highly capable. The part that I understand, I can do, while these people do the things that they do well, that allows it to happen. Because if it was just up to me, it wouldn't. We need all these capable people too. So we can all collaborate as a team with our customers and make all that happen, while I'm able to enjoy, that I'm engaged in that.
Yeah.
Because I'm out here in Montana, we're at this great event and we're shooting these matches. And so I'm engaged in all of that. And then when I go home, I get a big hug from my 3-year-old granddaughter.
Awesome.
And it just, every time I get one, I feel privileged to be able to experience that. So
that's awesome. Man.
That's where I'm at these days.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
Man, I get dig into the weeds with it. We covered so many topics today, and I think we'll have to do another podcast in the future.
Really?
My last question, unless you have anything else, what was your favorite go-to? What is the end-all be-all bench rest caliber?
Oh, there's only one, 6 PPC.
Oh, nice. I wasn't expecting that.
No, in bench rest, there is one dominant cartridge,
Gotcha.
period.
6 PPC. Gotcha.
So bench rest is such a funny game. It started out a bunch of varmint hunters that wanted to shoot better, and so it was all 22s.
Oh, nice.
And, every 22 you can imagine. So the bench rest folks, in an effort to innovate, created a class that made the caliber, I'm not sure why they did this, the caliber had to be .240 or bigger. They couldn't just say 6mm or bigger. It had to be 240. It's bench rest shooters. It's just the way they are. So it had to be 240 or bigger. So now your 22s don't work. Now there still were 3 categories you could shoot 22s in, but then there's this one that you had to shoot at least a 6mm in. So people start doing different things with BRs and this and that, and it doesn't really go anywhere. Well, Palmisano and Pisano got together, and actually they created the PPC. So this ties into where the first VLD came from. And maybe the next podcast we talk about is how Berger violated Sammy specs.
Oh, nice.
To the benefit of everybody.
I'd love to.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's links to all this. So the people who created the PPC actually created that case originally for a project that Walt Berger was involved with for the 300-meter shooting team. And the 300-meter shooting team also worked with a guy named Bill Davis, who was the person who created the very first VLD, 6mm 105 VLD. Now, this was back when they didn't even have H-twist barrels, but this was all specifically purposed for the 300-meter shooting team. So they were going to get barrels made, they were going to get these cases made, and they were going to get, all this stuff was going to be specifically for them, and that's all it was meant for. Well, Palmisano and Pisano created this case for this 300-meter shooting team, and they're like, this short, fat case sort of fits the bill for these bench rest guys. So maybe a few of these bench rest guys start shooting it. And that ended it.
Wow.
It became so dominant that the rule change that they made to force everybody off 22s ended up backfiring on them because now everybody shot 6s.
Wow.
Nobody shot 22s.
Wow.
So now where you would shoot a 22 and then struggle by shooting a 6, now you have 2 classes that are both 6s.
Wow.
Because where you can shoot a 22, nobody does. They always shoot 6s, and it's always a 6 PPC. By the time I got involved, and this happened well before I got involved, I mean, they're bench rest shooters, so they're a little nuts, but they'd come up with some wildcats, and there was a period of time when you couldn't get PPC brass, so then tall boys and, BR case modifications and all this kind of stuff started happening. But as soon as the PPC cases came back, then that was it again.
Awesome.
And so the PPC, 6 PPC is all
Cool.
anybody ever shoots. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I shot my entire bench rest career with a Kelbley action. Fantastic action. Those things are very, very good, and they're fantastic. Defiance does not make a Kelbley, Defiance does not make an action that will qualify in bench rest because of weights and all that kind of stuff. And so if I were to get into bench rest again, I'd be shooting a Kelbley action because I can't shoot a Defiance action.
Awesome.
Those guys are great. Walt and George Sr. were friends. They were the kind of friends that Walt would have, hot and cold. There were times when they were doing great, and there were times when they were at each other's throats. But they were close, and George was a very active part of the organization. And I know the Kelbleys; they're great people, and so I'm excited to be involved in this whole collaboration thing. I'm excited that we're doing well, and I know for a fact, because I tried to destroy Hornady at one point in my career, that there's enough market out there for everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
Nice. Yeah.
So as hard as we pushed to beat Hornady, they just kept seeming to grow and bigger and bigger. Jason's that kind of guy. But the point is, I'm not mad at any other brand. I'm not trying to destroy anything. What I know is if you do something well, people will engage it. Mm-hmm. And there's enough activity. I'm a huge 2A guy in the sense that we need to protect our ability to have firearms, not for our own safety, not just for our own safety, and for the security of the future and all that kind of stuff, which all of those things are excellent reasons to do that. But also because it just keeps things active. The market just stays large.
Yep.
As a manufacturer, I don't get scared when another brand comes on. I think, okay, cool. What are we going to learn? Everybody, we've got enough business. Everybody's fine. Everybody's feeding their kids and all that stuff's working great. It's the idea of why can't the whole thing be better and bigger and stronger? And then that makes the situation better for everybody.
Yeah.
And so, that's maybe a fun thing we can talk about later.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
I love it. That was a great podcast. Thank you for spending the time with us, man.
Thanks, Eric.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys.
We'll definitely do another one.
It's great to connect with quality people who make things happen, and it's just another collaboration. So
thank you, man.
Appreciate it.
Cool.
That's great.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you.